I worked in very early mobile games initially. So we were doing sort of 3D games on pre-smartphone phones. Like a lot of kids in the 80s, I was playing a lot of computer games on sort of 8-bit and 16-bit computers. And at that time, you sort of had to learn at least a couple of lines of programming even to be able to run a game. Yeah, that kind of taught me a lot about how the startup world works and how the tech industry works in general. And sort of my passions evolved from just being interested in the games industry to tech startups more generally, and like building and growing great teams and great companies and great products.
Welcome to DevReady podcast, where we're helping predominantly non-techs build great tech is the goal, as we always talk about. Today, talking to someone a little bit more technical. That's a guarantee here as we get into this conversation. Dan is the founder of NiceGit, looking to make source control a lot easier for normal people. If you've never been around source control and Git repositories, they can be quite complex, and I've been exposed to those a little bit since I've been out of development for a long time, and what's sort of going on in the world of using a cursor and working with it. So should be a good conversation. Dan, thank you for joining us on the DevReady podcast.
Thanks, Andrew. Really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, Dan, before we get into NiceGit and talk about what you're up to today, I'd love to just explore a bit of background and obviously UK accent, but living in Melbourne. Love to learn about the history of Dan and where you stemmed from. And I know it was a bit of a gaming and academic background, so I'd love to talk about it a little bit as well.
Yeah, so I grew up in the UK, and like a lot of kids in the 1980s, I was playing a lot of computer games on sort of 8-bit and 16-bit computers. And at that time, you sort of had to learn at least a couple of lines of programming even to be able to run a game. So that kind of
to run the commands, yes.
Yeah. Which with hindsight is a brilliant strategy. But yeah, that sort of gradually got me into the sort of programming world. Then I went to university, studied computer science, and then entered the games industry. That was my initial passion, and that was always like the kind of people that I idolized as a kid were the kind of bedroom programmers who were driving around in Ferraris, having made like a hit game for the Commodore Amiga and stuff like that. So
love it. Very cool. We in terms of how we started our background, my business partner did a games tech degree, and we planned on beginning the business and targeting a bit more of that, but we ended up in simulation tools, which was more about educational gaming and mission to Mars type stuff, rover simulations. We did some work with Sydney University, driving rovers around things, about command controls. It was a bit of fun in the early days in that space, but then I went into more business and technology and picked up some more enterprise contracts after that, and those journeys and connections. So you have to begin in a similar vein, but a bit different to yours, because you've got some big companies you work for in the past.
Initially I worked in very early mobile games initially. So we were doing sort of 3D games on pre-smartphone phones. So this was like the kind of Brew phones and Symbian phones. But
technology was
before the
average.
iPhone came in. Well, this was before people had even seen video on their phones most of the time. So like we were kind of porting PlayStation 1 type games using some very, very cool custom software rendering technology. But I used to show people the games that we were making on phones, and no one would believe that it was real. Everyone thought it was a fake. They didn't know how we would do it. They just refused to believe that these devices were capable of doing what we were doing. So that was an amazing experience. I was around I got to learn from some very, very cool, incredible programmers at that time. So as like the starting point for my career, I was very lucky and sort of had a very kind of steep learning curve as I
it's quite cutting edge at the time, right? So ahead of their time, really.
It's nuts.
Imagining where things were today, and now you got a little computer in your pocket which you can, and the games are just as not as good as a PlayStation, but they're quite powerful what's on the device.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think our first games, we had a memory budget of 4 megabytes, which would be like one texture in a modern iPhone game.
Yeah, it's classic.
And then
how times have changed.
Yes. After that, I joined a company called Playfish. So Playfish, we were part of like the first wave of Facebook gaming. So that was kind of like the Farmvilles. We had a game called Pet Society, which did very well. and really kind of rode that wave or created that wave sort of through 2008 through 2011. That was hugely exciting. That was sort of, we helped to kind of develop a lot of those kind of viral techniques that we now take for granted, but things like sending invitations, notifications, loot boxes, I'm a bit less proud of, but we did all of that stuff, and in those days, like we were able to achieve like true viral growth.
Loot
Which,
box
if
for
you've ever
everyone
been,
out there. What is a loot box for everyone out there that's listening that wants to understand that?
Oh, okay. So so loot boxes, the idea is like you buy in the game, you'd buy like a treasure chest or something, and then so you'd spend some in-game currency on the treasure chest, which may or may not map onto real world money. And then you open the chest, and inside there's a surprise that could be something of relatively low value, or it could be something amazing. You never know. So there's an element of luck, but it's been sort of pushed to the max these days, where there's some interesting questions about whether it's suitable for kids, especially, and you can perceive it as
somewhat
gambling.
like a poker machine, right? Yeah, or somewhat like a poker machine. Yeah, exactly.
Depending on how it's implemented, in the worst cases, it can seem like gambling. So.
Yeah, but from gaming, people are taking a lot of learning and how you bring that into just technology outside of gaming, and some of that learning. There's been a lot of that over the journey as well.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I took from Playfish, Playfish also had an amazing founding team, and like did a kind of the rocket ship Silicon Valley VC backed startup trajectory, and we ended up being acquired by Electronic Arts, which again was an amazing learning experience. But that kind of taught me a lot about how the startup world works and how the tech industry works in general, and sort of my passions evolved from just being interested in the games industry to tech startups more generally, and like building and growing great teams and great companies and great products.
Yeah, no, I've had some quite interesting experience in the early stage cutting edge stuff over the journey. I saw you. There's also a number of different gaming businesses that you've been at, and then started to morph into some sort of business technology as CTO sort of levels. What's the experience been over the career going from gaming into probably something that's not as linked to gaming, but maybe it is as we jump into what is NiceGit?
These days I'm the founder, and I'm working on a startup called NiceGit. So we're trying to create source control for normal people. It was actually inspired by my time in the games industry. So one of the things I loved about working in that industry is like you have these great teams, everyone's very motivated to be there, and you have these mixed teams of programmers, designers, artists, producers, writers, all working really closely together.
It's a very mixed team, isn't it? In gaming, it's a bit beyond normal technology. It's you've got all different layers there.
Yeah, so it's a lot of fun, and and it also means that just practically, like of the you're still building a piece of software in a sense, but of the files and the assets that go into making that software, like a good, there's a lot of code that goes in, but then there's also animations, audio, graphics, all of these different things, and within that world, everyone just gets on with their own job. So if an artist needs to go in and make a change to some texture images or to some animations, they're able to just go in and do it themselves. They wouldn't ask a programmer to do it for them. Like the programmer wouldn't even have the skill set to do that, even if they wanted to. But one thing I noticed, like, as I transitioned out of the games industry, was that kind of way of working didn't really seem to exist so much anymore. Like when I started in web development, for example, it was still really common for web designers, UX designers, to be doing their own styling work using a technology called CSS, which is still very common, still ubiquitous really today. But the point being that, like, as a UX designer, they were the experts in CSS. So as a programmer, if I was working with a designer, if I needed to sort of slightly change the layout or something and I couldn't figure out how to do it, I'd be asking them, how do I do it? And they would just be going in and just making those changes, fiddling around with the layouts and the colors and the styling and all this themselves. Which is, again, it's a very cool way to work. But that seems to have died off over the last 10 years or so, to the point where now in a modern product development team, it's very rare for anyone other than the programmers to be making changes directly to their project. So
that's probably fair. Yeah, it has evolved a little bit, even in our business. Yeah, it has. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And, that has some significant downsides. It's very, very slow. Like, I'm sure you've seen this in your project, Andrew, but it's, if somebody, you might have a professional copywriter who, writes a new version of the copy for a page within your web application. But they'll now, they'll probably put that in a Jira ticket or a Google Doc, send it, like probably attach it to a Jira ticket. It sits in the backlog for a few weeks. Eventually it'll hopefully get to the top if you're lucky.
It's a quick thing too, right? So stuff like that is just quick to update. It's just but it becomes a lower priority.
It can be, like, and if the person who's responsible for those changes just goes in and is able to just go in and make those changes themselves, it can be super quick. But if it has to go around that whole dev cycle of getting
get stuck into
waiting for a programmer to do it.
We're in a sprint, where things are locked, and then all right, next sprint we'll squeeze it in, or it might get delayed even longer. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
So that was the inspiration for NiceGit. It's like, so when you look into, okay, why are we no longer, why are so few people now actually able to make those changes to their projects? I spoke to a lot of people last year. I did about 80 user interviews, and the thing that kept coming up was just how hard it is to use, like Git in particular, and modern source control tools. So we have amazing tools these days for making changes with, like, the recent AI advances. Obviously, you can actually, we've got billions of dollars worth of technology at our fingertips to let us create this work and create code, create designs, all sorts of things. But when it comes to actually synchronizing those changes and that work with the rest of your team, we're still basically stuck in, like, let's be generous and say the 1990s. But we've still got people using terminal commands, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if if you're introducing maybe a new product manager who's got into vibe coding, and you're trying to sort of teach them how to use,
that is an opportunity right now, right? And we'll discuss it offline. There are ways we can actually improve or ideate directly in the code base, and it's probably better to do that. You've got, like you said, you've got style. If you're building on a product that already exists, you've got style there, you've got pages, you've got references. So you would normally go, this is the old way, get the UX UI designer involved. He works in Figma, updates the new screen if you're working on a new module. That then goes through to the development team. They slice it up, build the front end, then they build the back integration, the APIs. But now you likely can skip some steps, especially as your product's further ahead. Jump in some sort of vibe coding tool, or I've been playing with Cursor predominantly, and I'm not a coder. I once was, but it's more just UI. Can I build a screen now without going through all the hoops, which is probably the slowness sometimes in development. It's more the time, like you said. You got multiple people in the process, so the time is more the lag between the handovers, which is the problem, which is an interesting case to look at.
100%. So NiceGit is born to solve that problem. Like, it's a very simple, easy to use platform. It's fully Git compatible. Like, you can have half your team using NiceGit, half your team using kind of traditional Git tools. That's really important, and we're trying to connect people. We're trying to enable everybody within professional product development teams to make the changes that they can do, to do their own work, and to really streamline that whole process.
They're fascinating. So you've interviewed 80 people, which is a tick, because a lot of, and I know you've gone through some accelerators. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you've got Blackbird, Antlers, and StartMate. I think you've gone through all three of those. Where was the beginning, and why did you go down that path? Was it a network? Was it, I just need some help as a first-time founder? Yeah, this is your first time founding, or no?
No. I founded in the past, and so I founded an AI dental health tech startup. 6 or 7 years ago. Again, huge learning experience. So having been on that journey a couple of times, I was aware of the benefits of doing accelerator programs. I did do 3 last year. That's probably one more than I needed to do, but they were all great in their different ways.
Yeah, you always if you take a nugget out of all of them, that's all you need, really. Yeah, sometimes it's just one thing that changes the trajectory, really.
Yeah, and StartMate Launch Club was the first one I did, like, early last year. I knew, like, as a builder and as a sort of product focused person, my natural instinct is to put my head down and start building stuff. But I knew that I wanted to get out there and do the market research. So, and StartMate Launch Club is particularly good and particularly focused on helping founders to do that. So I kind of did it because I knew that would help me. There'd be some accountability, which worked really well, and they'd sort of push me to do that. So that worked really well. Yeah, got out there, did a lot of market research, met some really interesting people. Yeah, and that's obviously really steered the direction that the company and the product's taken since then.
How have you approached market research? What was through accelerators? What were some of the angles? What did it teach you in terms of approaching market research? Because what I found is some people can really lead the market research. What sort of process did you take into market research?
So it's a combination of user interviews. I'd say that's like the primary one. So just like talking to your potential customer base.
Yeah.
If even if your product is amazing and solves their problems, if you're not able to, if they don't recognize that, and if you're not able to communicate to them that that's what's going to happen, then that might be enough to make it a non-starter. And also, obviously it's clearly a two-way process. And again, like the positioning of NiceGit before I spoke to all those people was very different to the positioning afterwards. Like, for example, I initially assumed that the target customer rather than the target end user would be people like UX designers, and that they would be actively looking for solutions to the problem of them not being able to make their own changes. But actually, it turns out, having spoken to lots of people, that it was like team leads and product managers, the people who are actually responsible for the productivity and the happiness and the outputs of their teams. That's who NiceGit most resonates with, because they're the people they're the leaders who are seeing the benefits. So that was one example of a learning that came from those interviews.
Oh, we make plenty of assumptions when we're designing product and who our users might be. But I get why you landed sort of there, because they're the ones that in today's world can make shifts in dynamic and learning off direct user feedback, impact, change some ideas, and really implement some things quickly. But they probably never could have done before. So that's the world we're in now. It's shifted and enables the product designers and the product owners and those leads to really take over and actually implement something.
Exactly. And that was the other huge learning that came out of that initial research phase, as well as the user interviews. I was doing some market research and some digging around in the background. I'd already had the idea for NiceGit, but what got me really excited about the opportunity was doing some research into like GitHub user numbers. So GitHub is the leading host. There's multiple hosts, but it's by far the biggest one. So I was looking at the growth in GitHub users over the years. They've been growing pretty significantly for a while, but then 3 years ago there's this sudden uptick. Like they went from So suddenly they go from 150 million active users to 250 million in the course of just over 12 months, and that was of course triggered by the launch of ChatGPT, and then followed by the other LLM-based tools. So these are all new people entering the ecosystem. The vast majority of them without the kind of professional software engineer backgrounds. So these are new people wanting to build products, wanting to build stuff, creating software, but without having spent several years learning how to use the complicated old school tools. So
Brilliant. And the things like the lovables and all these have been spun up many Git users or have to in the past, and GitHub users. So there's rapid growth. I didn't realize growth was that big. That's fascinating. So they just blew that up that quickly, almost doubled the user base in 12 months. Wow. Fascinating how it's shifting in terms of all of that. You mentioned just a little about second-time founder. I had a bit of a look. Pearlii was the name of the group that you started originally. Let's unpack that a little bit. What did that teach you in terms of the journey? How did that begin, and where did it all stem from?
Yeah, cool. So Pearlii was a startup that I co-founded with two other people. One was an epidemiologist from the University of Melbourne. The other was an AI professor at Monash. The idea was to do home dental health checkups. So you could take photos of your teeth using your phone, and then using machine learning to try and identify dental health problems from those pictures. So this was back in around 2018. I think we founded it. So it was interesting. Like we were quite early on the what was the early part of the current AI wave, I'd be really excited to try it today and see.
Today would be fascinating,
Yeah.
because technology would be there to deliver a better outcome or a much easier outcome, I'd imagine.
Yeah. But yeah, we took Pearlii. We got some pre-seed funding from angel investors. We were able to sort of build an early prototype of the product. In terms of what I learned from that, so Pearlii as a company kept going. I think one challenge that we saw was like Pearlii. It was always a very kind of deep tech. It was always like going to be a significant development investment or a significant like investment of everybody's time before we were sort of revenue positive, at least on the with the core AI product. So I think one thing I learned from that was the importance for founders of just being incredibly explicit, right, literally from day zero, about what everyone's expectations are, who's intending to do what, just the basics, like who's planning on working full time, who's going to continue with their current job if they have one, like what are people's other commitments and expectations around that. So yeah, so whether you get a lawyer.
Yeah, a product like that needs probably significant funding because you're deep tech, right? So it needs some heavy investment, a lot of upfront development before you prove a case. Because if the product doesn't work or the technology under the hood is not delivering the outcome, there's no way you can deliver a user base or revenue. So that is probably something that came to light, I'd imagine too.
Yeah, definitely, and it's also like because it's working on like a unique data set. Like you would one might imagine that there'd be huge data sets of dental images from dentists out there in the world, but it turns out there aren't. So like one of our challenges was to gather that data. So it's a very kind of circular thing. We have to acquire users, collect data from those users, use that data to train the model. So yeah, it's a big investment up front, and to be honest, it's like it probably wasn't the ideal shape for the typical Australian tech investor. Like people, like the support for early stage tech in Australia is really great often. But for projects that do require a more significant upfront investment in the tech itself, that can be a little bit of a harder sell.
Yeah, lots of R&D definitely in that process, for sure. Interesting to look at unpacking. Yeah, there's a couple of learnings, of course. Yeah, who you're working with, what the commitments are, good to understand. You probably had some challenges by the sound of it along the journey in that process, which isn't fun if you have to probably pick up a lot of the work and it becomes how do you really deliver the outcome and how do you manage it? And then funding becomes a bit challenging. So what happened there? Did it just stop? Did it continue in some frame? Or?
No, Pearlii actually, I actually left Pearlii around the time of the fundraise. The business was pivoting towards a more achievable goal of being like a more general dental health management platform. The AI.
Got it.
I'm not exactly sure how far the AI ever got, but that was the part that I was motivated by and really wanted to nail. So yeah, unfortunately, like it just wasn't going to be viable to keep going in that direction. So, but yeah, the company kept going for a while. We did have to wind it up a couple of years ago, but it was overall it was a good experience. And
there's always learning. No regrets. That's the reality. Any project you're learning something new. It's tough when you're going through it though, because it becomes all right, what could we have done better? But when you reflect and have the time to reflect, you can definitely take something from it if you're willing to look and not just sweep it under the carpet. I think a retrospective, you want to do on a project, on a business, whatever it might be. There's definitely learning that we can take from it. That's for sure. What's the goal? What's the vision? I know you're in beta. You're looking for some pilot users. How many people are you working with at the moment? How's it coming together? Where do you want to be in 12 months, 24 months?
Yeah, so at the moment, as you mentioned there, we're in private beta. So we're looking for testers basically to help us to just evolve the platform and just stabilize it and get it ready for a full commercial release. So if any of your listeners might be interested in being a tester, please do look us up on NiceGit.com and you'll be able to follow the.
Yeah, I'll share that. We'll share the show notes and links from in the episodes, of course.
Great, thank you. But yeah, the goal is to be the GitHub for everyone else. So GitHub has built, it's hard to estimate the valuation at the moment, but a multi-billion-dollar valuation within Microsoft now. But by being the ecosystem for software engineers around source control. And they've done an amazing job of that, and they're continuing to evolve, continuing to iterate. But everything they're doing is to serve software engineers specifically.
Yeah, it is.
So
Yeah,
NiceGit
right.
will be that ecosystem for the non-specialist software engineers. Like we're all seeing the lines between who's a developer, who's not a developer.
It's blurring. It
Blurring.
is blurring. Yeah, 100%
Yeah.
blurring. Yes. And not everyone knows how to blur it properly either. And that's the problem. Yeah. So, and I'll give it a bit of learning for us just before you jump into the vision a bit more. We've found some clients like to attempt to do stuff in Claude, and they spin up some screens and it doesn't really match, and we already got a product, and then you're wasting it. You're not wasting time. It's good to present vision, but there's a quicker way if you actually work within the code base and build screens in it, and then we hand it over to the devs and they just patch it all together and test it all, and all of a sudden you're miles ahead. So I think people are still trying to find the ways of working is the challenge in itself as well. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I think we're seeing sort of the kind of the new AI generation is, it's been fascinating to watch. Like it feels like we're going through, in 2 or 3 years, we're going through all of the learnings from the software engineering world from the last 20 or 30 years. We're going through all of those again really quickly in 20 to 30 years. Sorry, in 2 or 3 years. Like, yeah, people are suddenly realizing, oh, hang on, it's not, I'm going to have to look after this code for a long time. Things like tests matter, things like the difference between what's a one-person project and a multi-person project and an enterprise scale project. Like these are very different beasts, and what works in one is not going to work across the board. And the tools you need to, vibe code an internal tool are very different from the tools that you need to create, releasable, commercial grade, user grade,
secure
software.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. So in terms of your target market, really, it is more that product owner level. Maybe it's a UX UI designer even. Who? If you go back to them, how many of those are you beatering with? How many would you like for the listeners out there? Because a lot of people listening are non-technical and playing in vibe coding. So it'd be a product that may be interested for sure.
Yeah, so we need to get up into the thousands before to really get the product ready for commercial launch as a productivity tool. And this is actually another learning that I've taken from NiceGit, which might be useful to other founders. Is as a productivity tool, like it's a tool that's open on your desktop, all day, every day. It's kind of one of your go-to tools. So the difference between building like a point solution. Like if you were founding a different type of tech startup where you were building a point solution that you can have a prototype out there in the wild within a few months, compared to like productivity software where, it has to do a lot of just the basics before you can build the value on top of it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So so that's been interesting. Also a lot of fun to kind of get it working. So to answer your question, we're looking for thousands of PC users. We're looking for everybody who works in any kind of product development. We say product development rather than software development because it's particularly well suited to basically anything with a UI, anything where you've got design involved, anything where you've got copy involved, anything that's going just beyond pure code projects.
Yeah, cool. I can see the problem, understand it, and I'll jump on, like I said, offline, and maybe I'll give it a go for you. Dan, I'll give you some feedback because, like I said, I would consider myself not a non-technical person, but not developer anymore. I used to develop some code probably 10 plus years ago, maybe more, since I put the tools down and focus more on a bit more product lens and business lens. So my energy goes into more how do we drive product and learning from feedback, which is good because now I can iterate a lot quicker, like I said, without jumping into Figmas and talking to UX guys, and I could just do some things myself. But learning and working with Git, a bit funky. Don't want to have to do that anymore and just command line prompting and stuff. I'm not interested. Am I breaking anything? You don't want to do anything too untoward. So happy to have a go.
Brilliant, thanks. Yeah, like as you were saying there, like if you'll excuse me for pitching for another few minutes, for another minute or two, what you were saying there is like when you sort of if you introduce somebody into the world of source control and explain what it's for, they're expecting something that's like Dropbox or a cloud drive. Yeah, it's just something that should just work
from a non-technical
in the
lens. Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, 100%.
yeah, it's like, so okay, great. So we're sharing files. We want to be able to make changes and synchronize our changes. That should be something that just works. And then at some point, somebody will sit them down, and they'll either sort of like a developer might sit them down to sort of, okay, well, I'll
talk about
teach you how to use
branch, here's this, and
yeah, exactly. And all this terminology comes out. At some point, they might produce a terminal, and 99% of people on this planet do not use the terminal and have absolutely no reason to learn how to. Or they might show them like a traditional visual client, like the one I use. I really quite like. It's called SmartGit. It's very good, but it has 34 buttons on the screen and keeps showing me warnings about post-quantum cryptography, which is important. But again, not what you're expecting to see as somebody who just wants to be able to share files with their team.
Got it. No, brilliant, Dan. No, thanks for sharing. Thanks for coming on, talking about NiceGit today, and all the best in the beta ring. And hopefully we'll get you a couple of betas on board off the DevReady podcast, and we'll share out the show notes and access points as well, Dan. Appreciate your time, and good luck with the journey. It's early, but it's also an exciting one by the sound of it. So thanks for coming on.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me, Andrew. It's been a pleasure.